Hello and welcome, and today I'm going to show you the final building in the Metcalfe Models Pub and Shops kit, my efforts putting it together, and my trials and tribulations of the rocket glue, and finally I'll show you a sneak peek of how I see the buildings come together on my first layout. So if you're new around here and would like to follow along with this project, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be told when I upload new content. So getting back to it, I'm just making sure I've got all the parts that I need, and the first thing to do is to pop out the main building wall. I find the parts come out in varying degrees of easiness. Sometimes they just drop out, and other times they need a good score along the line. I'm not quite sure why this is. I guess it's the die cut that they use. From here on in it's pretty easy. It's pretty much like the previous two buildings, and just breaking out all the windows and the parts that need to come away from the main wall, and then cutting out the windows so they're individually able to be attached to the back wall. I stick about 3 dots of glue on, seems to be sort of what works best, and it gives me a little bit of scope to move the window frames around once I've stuck them in, so if they're not exactly aligned correctly I can make sure that they're straight. And now I'm cutting out the scrap cards to mount the curtains on, and just go through the ones that I actually want to put the curtains or the blinds on. I didn't do it on all of them or follow necessarily the instructions, but I kind of decided that I would do the lower windows with blinds and then the upper ones with curtains. I'm now moving on to the ground floor doors and windows, which need to be flush mounted. And now just adding the bracing for the window and the side window frame to give it some support. This helps keep the building kind of upright and sort of vertical. And now I'm attaching the side door. Again, putting the window in with 3 dots of glue just so I can move around if I need to. The one thing I do find is that they don't always cover the tops of doors and windows, so I suppose if you were looking at it from a certain angle you'd certainly see the gaps. Also maybe if I'm taking pictures it might become apparent. So now moving on to attaching the floor strengtheners and obviously the in-between floors and the roof. And now in the second session I'm attaching the internal alleyway wall. Obviously I haven't done this in 15 minutes of modelling, more like about 3-4 hours. This is obviously to give a bit more rigidity, and also I'm just sticking on the chimney as well. And now moving on to the roof braces. This was a lot easier than the previous one actually. Although there are no markings to actually stick these strengtheners, but it's taken from the photo in my case. I'm now adding the spacers for the sign so that the sign kind of sits proud of the wall. And this is where I kind of realised that I actually missed out the parts that they give you when you take out the window frame and the door from the ground floor. and I cut out just some scrap card, but it wasn't a problem. So on goes the pub sign, and I chose the crown and anchor, and now I'm gluing the capping on, which is a little bit fiddly. One thing I do notice is that the ends are left open, so again, if you get close up you can see sort of certain inconsistencies in it, and if I was building this probably from scratch I would add kind of end plates to it. Now I'm putting in the main windows for the ground floor, which again, a few dots just to keep it from sticking down too hard and so I can move it around. And finally I'm kind of moving on to the roof section. This was a little bit more fiddly than I kind of thought it would be. In fact, the previous ones were a lot easier for some reason. But once I got it all lined up and attached, it was okay. Gluing on the chimney tops and the ridge tiles that needed to be marked out. I made a little bit of a mess of this actually and didn't quite line up at the top for this first one. I could probably go back and bodge it together with a bit more, but as this is my first attempt, I'm going to take that as okay. I'm now taking the base for all three buildings and cutting it down, because I'm not actually going to use the space that they've given, as the space that I've got is probably quite compressed. So that's how I'm going to use it anyway. So now the back wall goes on. And the glue I'm sort of still struggling with. The main thing I have a problem with it is that the amount of air bubbles I'm getting from it, and having to keep on kind of blowing out the bubbles so I can get the glue through. I'm not really sure why this is happening. I do like the glue, but I just need to work out where I'm going wrong with it. I've tried using the very fine point, but again, this is causing problems as well. Anyway, I'll keep using it, so if you've got any suggestions, let me know down below in the comments. But I do like it for its quick gluing and quick setting capabilities, but for the moment I'm kind of struggling with it. So I'm messing around with the idea of putting some tables in the pub at the moment, but in the end I didn't bother doing it because I thought, well, you wouldn't necessarily see them anyway. So that's virtually it for these three buildings, and the next one will be the bank and shop kit, which will then increase the size of the low relief buildings along the back scene, and then I'll show you the finishing off the chimneys when I start doing that one, or when I finish it. But for the time being, these have gone together really well. There's been a few niggles with kind of instructions where it hasn't been kind of completely clear, and but I've enjoyed putting them together, and I think they look pretty good for the type of kit that they are. So overall it took me a couple of nights of probably about a couple of hours each, so around about 6 hours for all three kits. So obviously not 15 minutes of modelling, but it definitely got me modelling every evening pretty much, which is really the goal of what I was trying to achieve with setting up this channel and getting the kind of modelling stuff going. I hope you've enjoyed this, and there'll obviously be more to come in the not too distant future. So here I'm showing you the mock-up of how I see kind of things roughly fitting together. It's roughly around about the length that I've got, which is about 30 inches. So it gives me a little space down here for a running through a tunnel, and possibly, I don't know, possibly 3 to 4 wagons on each siding, and then the board's going to come out to about here, so I'm going to have a bit more space to get the goods building in. So here you can see a mock-up of kind of the rough idea of what I want. The back scene's going to sit on the back of these racks, and so we'll take away the back wall, and then the proscenium thing will stick on top. And then I've got around about, I think 14 inches I said from front to back, so I've got to about here roughly, so it gives me an extra 3 inches or so, and the length of it is around about 30 inches, so that again gives me the kind of distance that I've got in the length of the layout, which is not overly long, but this is really my first layout, so really kind of just a test. And the point will be on the opposite side, so it'll be coming this way, but I just printed out the Pico templates, and I'm using code 75 rail for this, so I get a rough idea of where things go, and there'll be probably some kind of goods building which will either build from the front looking through, or it'll be from the back here, maybe sort of behind sitting proud of the retaining wall. But I really kind of want to find out where the spacing is for the buildings first. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do at this end. I'm either going to leave it blank and probably do painted back scene, or potentially I'm going to bring the retaining walls down the side here and have some low relief buildings coming on this side as well, and make it out that this is the main road and this is a side road. And so really that's the idea, but once I've got the baseboard put together, I'll have a much better idea of the actual physical sizes I can play around with, and I can put paper templates in for the bases of the buildings to get an idea of where they will actually finally sit. So I hope that'll give you an idea of what's actually going to happen with this layout, and I hope you join in with any thoughts and comments. So coming up in the next videos are going to be more Metcalfe models low relief buildings for the back scene, mapping out where these buildings are going to sit on the baseboard, and finally I'm going to try and scratch build a workman's shed out of card and paper. So if you've enjoyed this video, there are more of my videos over in playlists over here, and I'll see you in the next one.